Welcome to this week's edition of Dugout Dish Podcast. I'm Andy Kirikides, joined by my wonderful co-host Keith Lasser. How we doing?
Great. How are you?
Good. We got another wonderful guest on this week. I'm going to kick it over to you for the intro, and then we're going to get rolling.
Sure. Tonight we were joined by a longtime friend of mine. He's a good friend of Jonathan, who everyone knows is on here quite a bit. It's how I got to know him when he was at Air Force, and I'll let him kind of explain that part of it when we get into it. But tonight we're joined by West Virginia assistant coach Jimmy Roesinger. Jimmy, welcome, buddy. Thanks for being on and taking the time to chat with us.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me on. I would say it's kind of crazy. It's Veterans Day. Used to be an assistant at Air Force. So I'd like to say that I did that on purpose, and no, it was actually just the next Monday that had available. So, thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, we're fired up, man. It's not very often that we get we had Traz on, which is always great to have the Army represented. We have you, not that you're at Air Force now, but you're there for a very long time. But to have people, and especially on Veterans Day, to have somebody who knows what it's like and kind of can speak to the veterans who protect our freedoms here in this country. So thanks for joining us. So before we get going, give our listeners just a quick rundown of how you have landed at West Virginia.
Yeah, definitely. So I went to the University of Dayton, was where I played. Wasn't good enough to reach the next level, and had a business major, and wasn't really sure what I was going to do with that. I knew I didn't 100% love the business side of things. So Coach Vittorio, who was my head coach at the time, said, "What do you think about coaching?" I said, "Sure, let's do it." So opportunity came up that summer. Was out on the road recruiting with him. He was going to show me what it was all about. Kevin Bowers from Lincoln Trail. There was a spot open up with Lincoln Trail, and asked me if I wanted to do it. So for $7,000 and being the dorm supervisor, I was like, hell yeah, let's do this. Can't be anything better. And did that for a year. Got my fill on junior college baseball, and then moved on to Heidelberg University, where Matt Palm was the head coach at the time, and Chad Fitzgerald was the assistant there. It's a Division III in the OAC. And when it was a grad assistant position for 2 years, and then they hired me on full-time for a year and a half from there. Chad Fitzgerald took over as head coach, and Matt Palm ended up being our athletic director. So still around baseball side of things. Got a call from CJ Gilman, who was one of my college roommates at the University of Dayton. He was out at Air Force at the time, and said, "Hey, might have a spot open up at the Air Force Academy. Would you be interested?" Like, yeah, why not? Put all my stuff in a car, the little that I own, drove out there. Coaching is a crazy world where he let me stay at his house with his wife when they're trying to have kids. You're like, damn, this is awesome. So ended up getting there in 2016, and was the volunteer assistant for 3 years, and then went full-time from there, 3.5 years, and then went full-time. And then just this past year in 2023, at the end of the summer, got a call from Randy Mazey, Steve Savins, and they asked, would like you to interview for assistant position, work with the infielders, work with the hitters. And 48 hours later, I'm in Morgantown. 24 hours later, get the opportunity of a lifetime, and said, let's do it. So that's the quick rundown of my story.
It's it's interesting because there's we do have a lot of coaches that listen to this too, but we always try to thread this in when we can. Like the path to where you eventually land from a coaching standpoint is never linear, and it is a difficult business to break into. And I think that it's one of the things, like, if you can weather the storm and make it work, you can find yourself having a really good career in the coaching world. And it's not glamorous on the front end. Like you're making $7,000 and you're living in the dorms and being a dorm supervisor. Like, my first job was, I coached at West Alabama, after coaching in gosh, why can't I think of that summer league, Andy? It was in Northern Virginia. Clark Griffith League, which is now defunct. And I got a call from Gary Rundles and through Heels and Mike Jones, who's the pitching coach there, who played for Heels at New Orleans. And he was like, yeah, no, we're going to offer you the job. When can you be here? School starts tomorrow. And I was like, I'm in Pennsylvania at a tournament. I can't get there tomorrow. And then packed my stuff up. I drove home like 2 days later, packed my stuff up, and I was in Alabama like 5 days later. And then I was a volunteer at Siena where I made no money, even though I was the second assistant. And then I eventually landed at RPI as an assistant where I worked in admissions for, that was 7 years into coaching. That was my first full-time gig, like 7 years in. And then ultimately, obviously, I became the head coach. But, it's one of those things like you can make a really good career out of it and have a lot of success. But like it's not linear, and you're going to have to in this business, like in the game, like you have to pay your dues and do some stuff. Like I think some of the younger kids are a little bit lucky now that you can kind of walk into full-time jobs when you're like 23 years old because schools fund it now because of where baseball's at, but don't forget the guys that came before you that didn't do that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think it's kind of funny, put in your time, and everybody knows whether it's giving lessons till 10 o'clock at night or doing little league stuff that you're like, yeah, I'm definitely not having kids after doing that nonsense. But it is crazy how the game gives back to you, and the people are the most important thing at the end of the day. And and the coaching trees that we all have, those are the connections that help us get the next job.
Yeah, and we all know this. Like you run the camp circuit, you work all the showcases to pick up $200, $300, $400, $500 here and there. Because when you're broke, it goes a very long way.
Yeah, 100%. But
the other part of it is like we talked about this with I think Taps last week, Kristaps at Stevens, about how like when you get older, you get to your age, like and if you aspire to be a head coach, right, like you start kind of recognizing like other coaches on the road, and that's ultimately how you end up at the jobs, like the people but also like, hey, like they probably saw you working somewhere and were like, yo, this kid, like they see what you've done from a recruiting standpoint. They saw you somewhere and they're like, this dude's worth bringing in to interview, which like, even if you don't get the job, and I'm so glad that you did, but even if you didn't, like that's a huge accomplishment in and of itself, because it's like, all right, like what I'm doing is working, and people are starting to notice that like maybe I am really good at what I'm doing. And, I think that's, as much as it is about the kids and, it's not your ego that gets involved, but it is nice to know sometimes that like the work that you've put in over the time that you've been doing this is getting recognized by others to say like, hey, this dude's worthy of bringing in for an interview. And I think that like that to me was always something that was, it was a nice thing to kind of like, okay, my hard work actually does mean something for somebody other than my kids.
Yeah, for sure. I think one thing you left out with camps, or you said, hey, you go work camp for $200, $300. If anybody offered up free beer, you're like, hell yeah, dude, I'm in.
Without a doubt. I don't even know if they do it anymore. The Tri-State Arsenal used to do the Hit Doctor camp with Bob Barth, and it was. I was at Siena, and Coach Rossi sent me for 2 straight years. And I'll never, like, looking back on it as like, I was 23, 24. So I was, kind of naive to a lot of the guys that I was around. Like, not naive to the point of like, not recognizing it, but naive to like, I was in a room with, guys like, Dean Stotts, who was at Stanford for, forever. Gosh, who else was there? Starbuck, who was at Elon at the time and then ended up at Clemson. And Scott, he just went back to North Carolina. He was at
Scott Jackson.
Yes.
Scott Jackson.
Like shared a cage with him. And like I literally just shut my mouth and listened. Because I would like, and then I asked questions like I was a kid. Like and who else was there? Chef was there, Andy, when he was at Kansas at the time. And just like dudes in this business who are really, really good at what they do. And like, you can learn a lot as a young coach being in those situations and being humble enough to just say, I don't know anything compared to these guys, and just listen, because you'll learn a ton from what those guys say. And that was something for me that I always thought, and I was fortunate enough to have Coach Rossi, who, ended up coaching for 77 years. But he was just like, hey, go down there, recruit it, but listen to what these guys have to say. There's a lot of really good coaches at this camp. And it was worth it. And, Fred Corral was there. He was at Memphis he was at Memphis and Missouri, I think.
Missouri, yeah.
So it was awesome. But they would take you out in Philly and you hit all the famous spots of Philly, took care of everything, and it was awesome. But yes, the free food and the free alcoholic beverages on that end is always a seller of getting you to go to camps. But we'll jump this off here. Our first question that we always ask people: how do you guys go about finding kids to recruit at West Virginia?
So Jacob Garcia is our recruiting coordinator. He does an unbelievable job. I think I've had 3 straight years of top 25 class, and so he's getting out and grinding in the summer. And so obviously getting out on the circuit in the summer and finding through emails or from calling summer coaches, probably even some advisors that might call us and say, hey, saw this guy, and even scouts that come to our game. And so you write them all down, and I think we try to do a little homework ourselves, but to help us out a little bit there. But for the most part, we have a list of names and kind of run out in the summer. From that, I think there's other ways that we have signed people through camps, whether that's in the fall, summer, or winter camp. We just had a fall camp the other day where the weather was 65 and sunny, which is crazy this time of year in Morgantown, but got 50 kids to come out, play some baseball, and found a kid at camp. So a lot of times, we try to send it over to guys that we're interested in, or guys that maybe we saw 1 or 2 times in the summer, didn't have enough information or didn't get enough feedback on them that we could pull the trigger. So just camps, and I would say being out recruiting, and then also just how well Coach Garcia gets out and knows all the people, and then puts a schedule together for us to run around.
How important is it? How much do you guys weigh some of those contacts that you're talking about, like travel ball coaches, high school coaches? Is that a big piece of how you kind of move through that system? Do you guys find that to be real valuable in terms of identifying? I know Jacob's super thorough and has got ties all over, the East Coast and whatnot. But is that something that you guys lean on for additional information? Talk me through that a little bit.
Yeah. So when we call and ask the coaches who maybe their guys are, they usually give us a rundown. Some guys give us about 12 players, and some guys give us 1 or 2. And, you kind of have to wade through that a little bit and see that. But I think you have your guys that just like anywhere, you have a coach that you ask about, hey, who's a guy that can play for us? And you would offer up, you go see him, and you're like, man, that guy can really, really play. I think once that happens, you get some validity to your name that way, and also can go the other way when it's like, man, that guy's kind of full of it over there. He always plays 2 or 3 ticks up above what they actually are, and then it's well, he hasn't thrown against live batters recently, or he's coming back from injury, and so it's kind of that's the song and dance. But I think at the end of the day, it's how hard we want to work as individuals too, and doing that homework that Jacob does so well, and pretty much finding the needle in the haystack and saying, well, this kid's the right fit for us. So I think the coaches are an important side of things. They really help us get a list. And then from there, we got to break it down and do work ourselves. I think at the end of the day, you look at it and kind of on the page of, hey, you might offer up a person for us. Just because I like you doesn't mean I'm going to take him. I need to go out and do the homework. He might end up being a first round draft pick, but from our standpoint is we want to go out and see him with our own eyes. We're not going to see a video and say, all right, that guy's 95. We'll just take him, right? Especially with the climate that we're in now. Back when it was COVID, totally different, but now it's definitely something where we look to the coaches to tell us how the kid is as a person, and then we try to evaluate the player from there. But even that sometimes I think is difficult from the side of things where you call and you say, hey, how's Johnny? Does he work hard? What you have to ask the right questions, because most of the time best players are probably work decently hard and you always like your best players. So you're like, hey, yeah, he's a great kid. And then gets on a team in college and you're like, whoa, this is totally different. So hopefully that answers the question a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. You hit on the character piece and a lot of kind of the less tangible portion of it, right? Not your 60 time or your exit velocity and all that stuff, but what do you guys look for? Like, what are some green flags that conversations with kids, things they do on the field that can move the needle for you in a positive direction when you're evaluating a kid? Like, what's some of the stuff that you try to dig into to make you feel confident that, like, hey, this is a talented enough kid, but are we getting the right type of kid for West Virginia? What's that look like?
100%. I think you look at it at the end of the day, West Virginia, it's kind of a blue collar state and people have to go and grind and work hard. And so I think that's kind of a green flag for us is, the green light at the end of the day. It's some kid that kind of just always is talking about baseball, talking about being in the cage, going to work out, kind of that gym rat, dirt bag, whatever you want to call it. That's the guy that you're like, okay, I love that. Right? If you have some talent and you have 39 of those guys, you're like, I think we're going to be pretty good. So kind of a green flag there. Another green flag that we talk about a lot is, does the guy end up talking about himself, his team first? As you say, when things go wrong, is it the coaches? Is it the coach's fault? Just see where they are from a leadership standpoint too, as well. Talking about, are they leading their guys? Are they leading from the front? I guess you could say, rather than always the last one to do things. So from that side of things, I think those are some green flags. And then obviously winning is important, right? Is not going to a bunch of showcases to see what numbers they can get, but they go to a tournament and they're pissed because they're like, hey, we could have won that game and we took our pitcher out. Right? At the end of the day, we tell our guys here, doesn't matter who comes in, and when you guys play, it doesn't matter who comes in. Did we win or did we lose? We're a unit, a team at the end of the day. So no one individual is better than the team and easily replaceable. So shouldn't say maybe easily replaceable. JJ Weatherholt's a pretty good player, and that one maybe be a little bit more difficult to replace. But those are just some intangibles I think there, and Yeah, and just when we talk to coaches, there's not bad reports, like little things of, yeah, he has a 3.5 GPA. Like that guy obviously takes care of his stuff in school. The guys that struggle in school are probably going to struggle on the field as well too. So knowing that time management and school side of things, and see how they do there is something that we try to find out from the coaches as well.
Yeah, you hit on the winning, and you hit on the kids going to tournaments and wanting to win. And I think today's travel ball atmosphere, these kids experience something on that circuit that's very different from what they're going to be when they step foot onto a college campus, whether it's West Virginia or it's Heidelberg. It's binary. It's win or loss. It's, did you do something to help us win a game today? Was it you were really good in the dugout? Did you might have went 0 for 4 at shortstop, but did you make the right plays? Were you in the right spots? Did you do that kind of stuff? And at the end of the day, it just comes down to the winning and the losing, where travel ball at times, now is at the tail end of this. So I didn't see it quite as much, but you started to notice it with some of the younger guys, is that they lost sight of them being able to contribute to the bigger picture. And I think that's a big message for a lot of high school kids. And it's something that seems to be echoed by a lot of guys that we talk to, like yourself, where when you get to college, you're a part of a unit. If you're an offensive player, you're a part of an offensive team. And it's not just about hits, it's about how are you contributing to help a team score runs. And I think that's a tougher transition to college now for a lot of kids than it used to be, because a lot of the games used to be Legion games or tournaments where you're really trying to win the thing. And it's not about, well, am I lining up my pitching so they can get seen by coaches, which I understand that aspect of it. But for high school kids listening to this, think about what Jimmy just said, because that's an important piece of the puzzle during the evaluation period. But it's also, when you get to college, nothing else matters but winning. And it's really that simple. And that, I think it's hard sometimes for kids to make, it doesn't really hit them until they get there and they're like, oh, wait a minute, I'm a piece of the puzzle. I'm not the star of the show anymore.
Yeah, 100%. And just to go off that, Andy, like, I mean, it's a life thing too, right? It's not just baseball. It's a life thing, right? And it's like, it doesn't matter what you do during the day. You can tell talking on the phone with kids, you're like, man, this kid's a freaking competitor. He wants to win at everything. And I think you see it in our players' lounge. It's like, guys are playing ping pong all the time. Jed Jerko is on our staff and he kicks people ass and ping pong all the time, but they always like, dude, Jed, I want a piece. I want a piece, right? And I think that, like you said, in summer ball, maybe sometimes it is a little bit like that. You miss out on that side of things, but it's life, man. At the end of the day, you learn that specific trait in your high school years. You're going to be set up in college. You're going to be set up for after.
Yeah, I think there's, like anything else, there's layers to this. And I couldn't agree more with what you just said. And I also think that it's a microcosm of what travel ball has become. And in part, because of college baseball coaches, like, hold some blame. Like when I came up, and not that you're vastly younger than us, like, there was no Diamond Nation or Baseball Heaven or Northeast Baseball, kind of like there was no PG down in Georgia. Like none of that stuff existed. So, like we were talking on the pre-show about stuff like, my senior year of high school, we played like 50 plus games in the spring or in the summer with the South Troy Dodgers. Like not one of them was a tournament. There was, like, those things didn't exist. You just went and played games and like you wanted to see who was better every day. Mm-hmm. And that aspect of things has been lost, but I'm interested to see what's going to happen in the very near future, because, and we've covered this ad nauseum on this podcast, so I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but as you know, with the roster limit coming out next year, there's going to be I think, more of a heavy emphasis put on seeing guys play at a high competitive level against other highly competitive guys to see how they handle it and what they do, because the margin for error on missing is not as large as it used to be. You used to be able to, and look, we all know this as college baseball coaches, like you do not hit it 100% on all of your recruits. But when you have 40 dudes on your roster, or you're bringing 45 in the fall, like you have some margin for error to miss there. Like all of a sudden we're down to 34 and maybe a little bit more depending on what the NCAA finally decides to settle on. But like ultimately the what your roster will be is 34 for the spring. But you don't necessarily have a huge margin of error to miss on that. And you need to do, to your point earlier, the amount of homework that you guys already do is going to be uptick, because you want to mitigate that as much as you possibly can when they get to campus. Because it's just not like, you need guys who actually want to go compete, and you need guys that can handle, playing in the Big 12 and traveling and doing all this stuff, where like you can parse that out when they're playing against better competition and seeing stuff like that versus being on the showcase circuit. Like you don't really know. And like, it's funny, I was having this conversation with another coach today, a Division III head coach who's really good. And we were talking exactly about this. And I think that I'm interested to see what happens over the course of the next couple of years, because you're right. Like it's not just baseball. We use this game to teach a lot of other things and be able to get our players to ultimately get to the point where like they're going to be better human beings and go handle the real world and not be able to, not just melt down. And I like, we had a guy who played for me, and then he ended up going and playing for Soups at San Francisco. And afterwards he was like, I've never been around more competitive people than you two. And it's not like, I'm not saying that to pat my own back. It's more because like when you step into the arena of college baseball, you're stepping into a uber competitive environment, whether it's with the players on your same team or with the coaches that you're going to play for. Like you would be hard pressed to find guys who made a career out of coaching that are not competitive people. Like you're going to get challenged and they want to compete. Like that's honestly, I say this to people all the time who ask me if I miss coaching. Like there's a lot I don't miss. I miss being in the dugout on game day and making decisions and competing. Like I miss that aspect of it, because that's what, like, that fires me up. And, I think that when you can parse that out and you find that, like, and you have that competitive edge to you, like you can ultimately, like, if you have the skill set, you're going to find a place to play in college, because you're going to have that drive to make yourself better to get there. And if you lack that drive and you lack that competitive edge, you're going to have a really hard time trying to play college baseball anywhere.
Yeah, 100%. Our head coach, Steve Sabins, obviously assistant last year, is so fun to every day come in the office or go out to the field. He's so competitive, and if you're not ready for it, he's gonna let you know. And it might be a sly comment here or sly comment there, that all the guys, kind of snicker at, and he wants to get under your skin and just see like, hey, how are you gonna react to this? Because when we go to Texas Tech or when we go to TCU, like worse things are going to be said than that, right? Can you handle it at the end of the day? And maybe for one day you can't, but if you're a competitor, you're going to figure out how to come back the next day and be better for it, right? It's a step-by-step process, I think.
And in college, it gets twisted sometimes. Most of your competition is in your own dugout. And you need those guys to compete with each other, because, kind of cliche, but like the iron sharpens iron thing, is that the only time you're competing against somebody else is on game day, but there's way more practice days and team days than there are game days. And that level of competition you have internally fuels all of exactly what you're talking about. Like guys wanting to go at Jed to play ping pong, that's not by accident. It's because you got dudes that they're okay with losing, but they're going to go compete their asses off and do it. And they want the challenge of being put on that stage. And for you guys in the Big 12, like, I mean, every single weekend, if you're not ready for that, life comes at you quick when you're at Oklahoma State, and you got to try to get somebody out in the 8th inning. Like having those moments in the dugout, in the practice field, and everything that you guys cultivate during the off season, like that's what prepares those guys. And it's cool to hear that you guys kind of got that atmosphere going, and it's something that you guys focus on big time.
Yeah, 100%. I think, like you said, Oklahoma State, if you don't have that, they can put a 10 spot on you real quick, you know? So you gotta be able to weather the storm.
So you're an infield hitting guy.
Mhm.
I'm fascinated with infield play. I was an infielder in college, and that's what I coached in, coached at William and Mary and at a couple other places. But from a recruiting perspective, when you go to evaluate guys, we'll stick kind of in the middle of the field. But what are some of the traits that you really value when you're looking at an infielder? What are some of the things that kind of fire you up? Because I think that the showcase setting stuff has shifted at least the non-evaluator portion of the baseball world towards how hard are you throwing a ball across the infield, and that seems to be like a big focus. Well, my infield velocity was 88, and I know that that was far down my list. Obviously there's a bar you need to get to in order to make plays in the Big 12, but I'd love to hear it from you. When you go watch a kid that's going to be an infielder for you, what are some of the things that you need to see a kid be able to do in order for him to be able to compete at your level?
Yeah, 100%. And by all means, obviously try to find the perfect formula. So if you ever do find that, let me know on that one. But I think the first thing that you look at is athleticism. Typically, you're going to look middle of the field is going to be the strongest for you. I mean, shortstop, everybody's going to look there. Second base, everybody's going to look there. But looking at the middle infield, seeing how athletic they are they prep stepping and locked in on every play? Do you hear communication talking about what happens if this happens? Hey, how many outs there are? Things like that are small things but end up being a big thing. The athleticism piece is, you know, obviously how well do they run and can they throw from different arm angles? Can they field with two hands and can they field with one hand and not just do one or the other? Do they feel comfortable that way? Can they throw on the run? Can they shuffle their feet and go 2-step, 4-step pattern? Like you said, with seeing the velocity across the field, think that when I look at infielders, it's interesting. It's like how quickly can they get the ball in and out of their glove and get someone out? Typically, if you do that, there has to be some fluid smoothness to your infield style. So that's always good, but I think there's so many things that could go into it, but the athleticism piece, if you're not athletic, it's going to be tough for you because there's only one shortstop spot. And if we have a shortstop at every position on the field, personally, I think we're going to be really good because they're used to being the man, used to having the ball, used to communicating. And the last thing I think that's super important is energy. Just somebody that's an energy giver out there. He's in the middle of the field. You always see that catcher. I mean, Paul Skeens was unbelievable at this when he was catching for us at Air Force, just kind of giving the fist in a big situation, and that stuff that he was doing in high school, trying to fire up his teammates. Like everybody knows the shortstop's, best player. And it's like, if that guy is playing with energy and playing hard, we're following that guy. So I think those are the things that necessarily look for in an infielder, and then obviously the offensive side. There's a portion of that as well too, but just talking strictly defense.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with throwers. Like any kind of sport where people throw, like looking at quarterbacks, like the dudes are really good throwers, and that was something that I tried to really hone on with kids and made a huge emphasis when they got to campus is it's half the battle as a shortstop, as an infielder. So I always gravitated towards guys who were good throwers, and not just hard throwers, but to your point, multiple angles. Do you have a good clock? Like, you shouldn't have to throw it as hard as you can across the infield every time. Like, do you understand when you have time and you can have a nice, calm, cool, collected throw? Um, can you catch the ball outside of your frame of your body and get your feet right so that you can make a good throw? I was always obsessed with that, but I'd love to nerd out with you on infield stuff because I think it's just such a cool part of baseball and something that goes unnoticed because those guys in the big leagues make it look so darn easy. But some of the finer points of it, I think, can really they get really detailed in terms of what can separate a guy for the next level. But those really accurate throwers and kids who had a really good clock, that seemed to always, I used to gravitate towards those guys. And it takes time. Like, it's tough to see that in a showcase.
Yep.
But if you can watch a kid play 4 or 5 times, you can start to get a pretty good feel for, like, oh, that kid's actually a really good defender. Because I've seen him make multiple types of plays. I've seen him on the run. I've seen him have to unleash the throw. I've seen really good timing, the energy piece. Yeah. So
I think going on top of that with a thrower thing, I mean, watching guys warm up in the summer is unbelievably valuable. If you have talked to the coach before, you know who the kid is out there. Obviously, we want to say hey to a coach, but seeing him down the line throw, it's like, is it going to the guy's chest, or is he playing fetch over there, or is it outside? And that's one thing that we do this fall. We have every fall we have a manager, fall game we have a manager marking an X on a body, and then we give it to them at the end of the fall to show where their hot spots were. So like you said, you see one of our backup first basemen, it's like focus is a big thing, right? It's like not just going to play catch balls all over the place, and then you're like, hey man, let's just hit him in the chest, lock it in, and it's like boom, boom, boom. So little things, I think.
yeah, those routines for infielders is, I think it goes such a long way. Be really good at playing catch. I think a lot of kids don't play catch enough. Everything is leading into a game. I don't know. I just play a lot of catch. Like, when you go down the line, don't make it, well, I'm just going to throw until I get loose. Like, let's work on some stuff. Let's have a little bit of fun with it. There's nothing wrong with throwing from multiple slots or, glove side turns. And, like, I never had any issues with that stuff because I thought ultimately it really produces good throwers, and you give some kids some freedom as long as there's some intent behind it. But throwing is one of those things that you really can't get good at it unless you do it a lot. And if you're an infielder, I mean, it's one thing to catch it, but you got to get that other part of the equation right. And in order to do it, for those high school kids that are listening now, and even college guys that listen to this, get a routine. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be flashy, but, like, have a purpose every time you put the glove on and you're going to throw something. Like, make it worth your while, because those reps add up, and then you get in a game and you do have to make that out of frame play, and you have to get your feet in a funky spot. Like, you've already done that 1,000 times because you've been doing stuff like that, playing catch all the time.
Creativity, imagination, like you said, like you got to make those plays on the field. So why not try to mess around and do it? I mean, I throw from down under and I'll throw it past 90, and people are like, how the hell did you do that? It's like, I don't know. I probably threw a hell of a lot over people's head when I was growing up, but you just get, like, you wouldn't have feel with it otherwise. And I think that that's also part of the background for most of the guys, like just telling them, hey, it's okay to throw the ball away. It is. You failing at it allows you to become better or to figure something out, and not always feel like a coach has to say something.
Yeah.
Well, there's 2 things here I want to touch on. The fail forward thing is electric. Like, a lot of people, especially in this game, people hate failure. In practice settings, like, it's okay to fail. because the whole intent is that we can figure it out and work on it and get better at it, so that when we do actually play a game, it doesn't speed up on us and we're okay. Like it's mind-boggling to me sometimes where like people want perfection all the time in this sport, where like you fail 7 out of 10 times and people are like, that dude can flat out roll the pole. Like that's bizarre to me. Like you have to fail at some point in time to be able to get better at whatever it is you're doing. Very few people who play this game do not fail along the way and face some sort of hardship to get to where they are. But the other is like the catch play stuff. Like I know you two want to nerd out on infield, and I'm here for it. But that said, like the catch play stuff plays for everybody from a position standpoint and for pitchers too. Like if you're listening to this, like you need to have some semblance of a routine. It doesn't just have to be infielders, outfielders, catchers. I was a horrific player of catch when I got to college. Terrible. Didn't even know I was terrible until it was brought to my attention that I sucked. And then like I worked on it, and I'm 38 years old now, and I play catch quite frequently, and I still throw BP and do all this stuff. And like I can, it's like I'm good at being able to throw it at your chest or your head and do this stuff, but it's also something that I've done every time I've picked up a baseball since my freshman fall in 2003 at Marist College. Like that is 20 plus years of me throwing a baseball and realizing that like you have to have intent behind whatever it is you're doing when you put a glove on your hand and throw. Like, yeah, when you become a coach and you're going to throw BP and you just want to screw around and throw a ball a couple times, yeah, that's a little different. But when you're a player and a kid, like there has to be some semblance of intent behind what it is that you're doing, because for multiple reasons. One, to get better at what it is that you're doing, but also this sport, especially when you get to the college level, like we can't talk about literally every single thing that could potentially happen in a baseball game, on a field, in a 2-hour practice, or in a week of practice. And we're not going to take time out of our days of every single practice to work on multiple arm angle throws with guys bearing down on you at second base when you're spinning a double play, or a ball that you pick as a catcher and the runner's going and you want to pick and throw. And outfielders who short, like they pick that short hop and they got to throw to a base, or that in-between play where like the runner doesn't know what to do and you got to come up and throw. Like that's not something that you work on every day at practice. But those are things that you can take for 15 minutes while you're getting loose before practice and do that stuff. And then all of a sudden you stack that on top of each other over the course of a fall or a spring, and you just got exponentially better at all of those things. And it's so like, what is it nowadays? They have all those guys on Instagram that are like the self-help, whatever gurus. Like it seems that way, like stacking good things, like, but it's true from a baseball standpoint. Like if you can do that, everybody throws before practice, before you start. Like you stretch, you do your dynamic warm up, and then we throw. You don't step on the line and throw. You're inside or outside of it. You do all of that stuff. But like you can take those 10 or 15 minutes and legitimately get better at something. And then you got like in those 15 minutes, like even if you suck the rest of practice, you're like, you know what? I got better at throwing today. And it seems so simple and so easy, but I think it's something that gets lost, especially on high school kids coming into college, not understanding how critical it is of your catch play. And you just said it, like you can see it when you show up to high school games to watch guys throw. Like Andy and I have gone to games and I've watched kids roll out there in Crocs. And I'm not trying to be this old guy, but like, you can't tell me you getting your arm loose before a game throwing with Crocs in the outfield is beneficial for you. Like,
and maybe they were in sport mode,
Maybe they were. Like, but throw some turfs on for me or something. Like, what are we doing? Like, you're not like I'm not interested at that point in time. And maybe in 10 years they have Croc cleats. I don't know. But like, it's not something that like you're telling me right then and there that like you don't care. And there's a distinct difference, I think, with guys who ultimately end up playing at the college level, because it's only 7% of guys. It's a little bit higher with JUCO and NAIA baseball, but like, let's call it 10. 90% of guys aren't going to play college baseball. So like you're outliers already. Like they're going to do outlier things. And those are things that can separate you, not only in the recruiting process, but when you get to college, like that's not something that you necessarily have. Like it's a 1 or 2 conversation with a kid, because it's like, yeah, he's got a routine, but like, I just want to tweak it a tad bit for what it is that we do here. And that's an easy conversation versus like, dude, you can't throw. Like, your catch play is horrific. And like, in order for you to actually get on the field, you got to be able to do this stuff. And that creates a whole other longer process. And Andy and I have talked about this a lot. Like, Hobbs talked about it, at Arkansas, where they got like one of the easiest way, and I think you'll agree, like one of the easiest ways to get yourself burn as a younger player is to be really good defensively. Because you can get late in the game and be like, he might not even hit in the back third of this game, but like, man, he's going to make every single play. And you could find yourself in those situations, and then all of a sudden it's like someone gets hurt, someone gets dinged up, the other guy's not playing well. Like, we're not going to lose. Like, we're actually going to be better defensively. We might lose a little offense, but let's see what happens. And like, it's a hell of a lot easier at the college level, in my opinion, to find yourself on the field if you're really good defensively versus trying to out-hit everybody who's in front of you, because hitting is hard. And you're likely going to be a little bit behind the guys that are there. But defensively, if you can separate yourself there, not only are you going to push the guys in front of you, but you could find yourself on the field a hell of a lot earlier because you're really good defensively, and let the offense come with it as you get older. Sorry, I was on my soapbox.
All good.
Stay on it. No, it's the defense thing is, I don't think it's a coincidence that when you look up and you're looking at super regionals and that kind of stuff, everybody can play defense, and only one guy doesn't get to wear a glove. And as an infielder, you're an infield guy. Like, that defense stuff, like, it legitimately wins games. The way I think about it is, baseball is and always will be, it's a run prevention sport. Everybody loves home runs and doubles and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, at the end of the day, best way to win is if you can prevent people from scoring runs. Like, you can always find ways to score runs. It's hard to manufacture defense. Mm-hmm. So guys who are listening to it, if you can have a good throwing routine, you're going to make yourself a viable option, come game time. And I think it's something that's pretty important. It sounds like that's something you agree with too, Jimmy.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
How much are you guys using data to find guys? I'm assuming you do a lot with development stuff, but how much do the metrics and stuff play into your evaluation process, and what kind of emphasis do you put on that?
Yeah. So I think the data is probably more on the pitching side for us, just because our pitching coach does a great job. Pitching director that we have, Chris Riley from the Red Sox, like, is a former scout. They do a good job of looking at the TrackMan numbers and seeing how does this correlate with what's going on out there, right? And the swings and misses or weak contact, whatever it may be. So I would say it does play a big part, but and there's the other side of it too. You can't just nerd out on the data as well too. So like, we just had a kid at camp this weekend, 88 to 90. His extension, was 6'4", something like that. But what we really liked about him was he was throwing strikes. And that's easy to see with your eye, right? Seeing 3 different pitches commanded for strikes. And so it's like, I think there's the portion of it where you see the data, and then you have to evaluate live with your own eyes at the end of the day. Same thing we kind of talked about recruiting wise. Like, you guys, Andy, you send me a video of a kid, you're like, this is a no doubter. Here's his exit velo. Here's, his stats and everything. You're like, okay, cool. I got to go see him live right at the end of the day. So I think that it's part of the puzzle. It's not all of it, obviously. I think it probably leans a little bit more towards the pitching side of things there. We talk about it a lot offensively with our guys. It'd be great if in the summer we could get a report and talk about decision making about, hey, is Johnny over here swinging the zone, or what's his chase rate, oh, he's 8% chase rate. Damn, I got to go watch this guy, right? Because that is it's something so difficult to do, and personally, I think it's you're either good at it or you're not. There's not a whole lot of getting great at it once you get to college. I think there's areas that can help. So from that side of things, the hitting side of things, like the exit velo is nice, like you said at the showcase, but it's like, what does our swing look like when we get that exit velo, right? If it is over 100, great. But if you only did it once the whole summer, like what are we talking about here? So what's the, is he consistently on the barrel, hitting things hard, making great decisions at the plate? I mean, guys that don't swing out of the zone typically, JJ Weatherholt doesn't swing out of the zone, smashes baseballs, right? Big guys in the middle of our lineup that struggled a little bit this fall. The report, oh, they swung out of the zone too much, right? They're at 30% chase. So you're like, at the end of the day, it's nice to have the analytical stuff and the data, but it's pretty simple, right? It's another thing to obviously do, but in theory, let's try to just keep it as simple as it is from that side of things. So kind of went both ways with that, I guess.
No, and I think it's important for people to understand that the data is a part of it, but it's not the decision making isn't being made solely on exit velo and your spin rates and to your point, yeah, that kid he checked some boxes for you, but the thing that tipped the scales was 3 pitches for a strike. Now you got a kid who's got a chance to be competitive because we all know in today's game that unless you're throwing 96, like you got to do some other stuff really well. And that's obviously something you guys value. And I think you kind of answered this question, but all things created equal, you're looking at like 4 or 5 guys that check the box for you from a physical perspective, that they have what it takes to play in the Big 12 and help you guys compete for a title there. When you're breaking them down offensively and you're going to games, what are some of the things that you like to see a kid be able to do that clue you into like the tools are going to show up on game day?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think obviously the first thing where you're talking about green flags and red flags, where do you hit in the lineup, right? If I'm coming to see a kid and he's hitting 9th in the lineup, I mean, typically, unless it's Canes National, they're probably not going to be that great offensively, right? So seeing if they're in the top of the lineup, I think, like you said, the swings out of the zone, like, do they take what is given to them, right? It's you see it in batting practice a lot where the days that you hit the most home runs in batting practice are usually the days that you suck the most offensively. And so I think when you're at the game, it's if you do get a batting practice, see how they take it, right? Is it almost boring watching it because one of our best players at Air Force got drafted by Kansas City Royals? I mean, people were like, what's up with his BP? Just 2 hoppers to short, 1 hop to short, line drive at the shortstop as a left-handed hitter. I mean, it was just awesome, right? And so I think from that perspective, the hitters, if you get to see the BP, that's important. As they hit, where are all their hits coming from? Can you tell that there's an approach maybe that they have a thought going up there? So then when they do come to school, it's not just like, what the heck is this thing, right? So that's, I think, important. Obviously, the amount of times that they hit the barrel is kind of the number one thing, right? If they're swinging really hard but the ball's not going forward, it's probably not going to work out. But I mean, and it's easy. I mean, that's Andy. I know you're laughing, but it's like, keep it simple, right? At the end of the day, if you can get the barrel on the ball more times, like you're probably going to be a pretty good hitter, right? It's like we had a kid at camp this past week, and it was like, man, that guy like doesn't swing and miss. He doesn't swing out of the zone, and he doesn't swing and miss. Oh, that's weird. And when he does connect with it, it's 95 plus in 4 to 5 at bats, and you're like, okay, that makes it pretty easy for us on that side of things. And I think it's interesting too, just seeing going back to the winning side of things, right? Like, is a left-handed hitter okay with bunting, right? Bunt for a hit, do something. It's like that's part of who we are at West Virginia is we're gonna bunt for a hit and run, do all that stuff. Try to create offense. I think if you see that in the summer, like you said, it's a showcase. People are trying to hit home runs and do this, but it's like, man, I can bunt for a hit. Obviously, it shows me you're fast, shows me you have a little feel, and it also shows me, dude, this guy wants to win. He doesn't care if he hits a home run. If he can bunt and steal a couple bases and touch home plate, and our team touches home plate more than the other team, then great. So I think that's kind of the main things is seeing decision making, and do you get barrels, and then I think there's different things in the swing that you can ultimately try to fix, and things that you can't, just from, as we all know, trying to work with guys. I know Glass obviously has this like, why can't this kid do this thing? So there's definitely things that I think looking at successful hitters over time, like, does he get into a good position at launch when we took a video of him consistently? If he doesn't, it's like, might be in trouble.
Love you brought up the BP thing. Was that was it the kid who hit all the doubles at Air Force? Is Sam something?
Sam Clusingham. Yeah, he was a PG grade of 7 or 7.5, something like really terrible. You can look at his picture on PG, and then he ends up hitting 400 for 2 years. Just unbelievable.
I was a 7.5. Thanks.
The BP thing though, I think it's so, I don't think it gets talked about enough. And the funny thing is that there's a lot of big leaguers that you can go through your YouTube archives and you can watch Manny Ramirez and you can watch David Ortiz and you can watch Barry Bonds. And these are guys who are obviously famous for all the damage they did and the home runs that they hit and all that kind of stuff. But you dial it back and you go look at Buster Posey take batting practice. It's like, yeah, we're not asking Buster Posey to hit a bunch of ground balls at the second baseman, but there's a method to the madness of hitting the ball over to that side of the field with some intent. And I think that a lot of times with social media, we're obsessed with, can we elevate the ball? And hey, don't get me wrong, I love a kid who can pull the ball in the air because you got bat speed and you probably got some strength. And if you could spin it that way, well, like, yeah, that fires me up. Like, you need a kid who's got bat speed to do all that stuff. But the process of batting practice and kids who do it really well, it's not a coincidence that kids like that, like Sam, end up going on and being really good. There's not a lot of guys who I've been around. There's been a couple that were just horseshit batting practice players, but really good in the game. Most of the guys who can really hit, they took awesome batting practice, and it wasn't how many home runs did I hit. It's, did you execute the situational round really well? That middle of the field ball flight with a ton of consistency. And then we'd always, you're coaching 22-year-olds that are going to go play professional baseball. Like, yeah, you let them go feel good and let them try to elevate some stuff, but it's usually the back half of batting practice and you let them go get it a little bit. But I'm glad you brought that up because I think that the showcase setting has shifted a lot of kids and they lose sight of what batting practice looks like in college and what preparation looks like in college, and that it's not just 5 rounds of let me see how far I can hit this thing.
Yeah. And obviously the World Series, they showed Freddie Freeman doing his thing, just super easy. And then the guy just comes out and rakes. So, there is a method to the madness, like you say.
Yeah. Yeah. It's when you get to college, and this will be the next question I'm going to ask you, like the learning curve steep. And it doesn't matter where you go, but what are some things that freshmen who get to you guys, the kids who are successful early on, what are some of the things that they manage really well and that they're able, what allows them to kind of get acclimated quickly?
So you said, what do they manage well? And I would say time, right? And those obviously go together, and it's a buzzword, right? But it's so true. We're setting their schedule up, and you got class in the morning, and then you got practice in the afternoon, and you got study hall. Then you got to go to the Coliseum for dinner. You meet with our academic advisor. So I think it's trying to understand why you are here at the end of the day too. It's awesome. West Virginia is a unbelievable school, and you look at the tailgating on Saturday and you're like, God dang, this is crazy, right? And so it just depends on it at the end of the day for all the kids out there, right? And for our guys, do you truly love baseball? Like, are you here for baseball? If that is in fact so, you'll hit some speed bumps along the way, right? And you might struggle on a test or econ or whatever it may be, but can you figure out what I need to do in those classes to be successful, then come to practice and be okay with kind of being boring, just like batting practice, and doing it all over again. So you have the same routine, some consistency to life. So I think that's where it's a little troublesome for freshmen. Usually they are learning so many new things, but they can't get into a routine right away because they have a bunch of classes. They're learning what bunt defense is, what first and third. They're overwhelmed. And if they can just start on day one saying, here's my routine, I'm going to try to do the exact same thing tomorrow, exact same thing the next day. Obviously tweaking it if they need to, but I think that helps them. The guys that get acclimated the fastest for us, they're like, I'm not going to be perfect, but here's my schedule that I'm going to try to live by. I'm not using as much energy trying to worry about what's next, kind of a deal.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
those
think
3 or 4 months can be a kick in the nuts for kids sometimes.
Oh, it's a huge one. Like, especially the school standpoint, depending on if you're like high academic and things of that nature, like you have to figure out relatively, and we haven't even touched on the fact that you're on your own for your first time and you got to do laundry and you have to do a lot of things that you're probably not used to doing. And you hit the nail on the head too. Like, you have to go eat. Like, there were a lot of freshmen I had at RPI, like sometimes like they would lose weight and I'm like, what are you doing? They're like, I don't have time to eat. Like, well, it's kind of a critical part of you living is eating. Like, so we have to carve out some time to get to the dining hall a handful of times a day. The other thing too, like, and I'm interested to hear what you guys do. And I have like 2 questions, and then I don't want to take up too much of your time. But the physicality of baseball has morphed over the last like 15, 20 years. And it's more physical than it's ever been. Like, what are you guys, like, how important is the weight room for you guys? Not only from an injury prevention standpoint, but just from like a getting stronger to hit the ball harder, throw it harder, to move better, all of those things. Like, what are you guys doing, and how important is it for you guys at West Virginia?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is one of the top things. I mean, last year, Kelly Cosgrove was our strength coach, and we broke the home run record for West Virginia. And I think that obviously that's directly correlated to guys getting stronger. This year, Chandler Geller is with our guys, doing some more mobility, paying attention to how quickly they're doing some of the lifts. When I say quickly, not how fast they can get done, but how they're moving the weight, and guys paying attention to that. But the weight room, I mean, 3 to 4 times a week, they're in there, trying to do speed and agility 2 to 3 times a week. Obviously, they're young, and our guys, we try to pay attention to how much effort they exert. So part of, I would say, the weight room and the speed and agility is the third part of it is recovery. Having the cold tubs or saunas, or roll out, taking the time to do that. It's so important. I think look at, I just use myself for an example. It's like anytime I go and lift with a staff, my lower back hurts. Well, how much time do you spend stretching out or doing dynamic warm up? They're like, no, I usually just put 135 on the bar and just have at it, So that's part of it. But yeah, the weight room is so important, and we even do at the end of the fall, it's called the Big 12 Challenge, where there's an aspect of weights in there. And then the last thing the reason is like, yes, the strength is important. Yes, paying attention to the body fat, doing the bod pods, making sure we're in the right place. I would say that it's not always put as much weight on and get as strong as you can as possible. I think that obviously hurts some guys because they lose how their body moves. It actually hurts them. But the big thing I think in the weight room is the camaraderie at the end of the day, right? The teams that are the closest, like, they can get through things. If you see your guy grinding over to the right and you're like, man, I need to stop and freaking cheer this guy on because he's about to squat, 500 pounds. You just see each other going through it and sweating and getting after it. It's like, I want that guy in my foxhole.
Yeah, it's huge. I think that it's something that we try to at least bring up on all these interviews, because it's not that every answer is the same, but they're very similar, of like how important the weight room has become at the college level. And I think the earlier that you can get in there, the better, the shorter you can cut down that learning curve, and being physical is something that can help you get on the field a little bit faster too. And obviously the injury prevention and what you can handle. And, this is also the same as, the time management piece you're talking about. As a freshman, you're about to undergo, like, take out the fall. Like, you're about to go through a college baseball season that you've never gone through ever in your life. And you're going to class, you're playing 56 games, you're traveling all over the country. You still have to eat. You got to do, there's a lot of things that you need to be able to handle. And, the weight room can be one of the things that kind of can get, like, if you can handle that, like, there's things that you can, you'll find that you can get a little bit easier on handling some of the other stuff. But, like, it's that first college baseball season, I think, for freshmen is, to your point with the time management, and it's, you don't know anything about what it is you're about to go through. And I'm assuming you guys are kind of like Andy and I when we were at Marist, like, you live out of a bag for the first 4 or 5 weeks. You're like, all right, you're like maybe not as much as we did, but it was like, okay, we're going to Louisiana, and then we're going to Florida, and then we're going to North Carolina, and just leave your bag over there in the corner, and just don't unpack it, because you get home at 4 a.m. on Monday, and you got to go to class, and then you practice Tuesday, Wednesday, and then you're out on Thursday, and then you're gone Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you just rinse and repeat for 5 weeks.
100%.
And it is a bear to get through. Like, when you haven't done it, like, you get to that 3rd week and you're like, yo, what the heck is going on right now? And then you blink and it's the end of May and you're about to get into the conference tournament. And you're like, yo, where did this season just go? Why did this just go by in the blink of an eye? And it's I agree with you. The time management piece is huge. But I don't want to take up too much of your time. So last question. We always end with, what is the advice that you would give a family of a potential student athlete going through this process right now who wants to play college baseball?
A great question. I think it's a difficult one, to be honest with you, as you go through it. But to be able to be seen, I think find for the kids what is your list of this amount of schools. Obviously, being honest with yourself and asking people that you trust, your coaches, and you might not like what they have to say, right? But telling them Division 3, junior college, D2, whatever. Cool. Do some homework and find out. Okay, I know something about Heidelberg now. Okay, hey, the Air Force Academy here. Saginaw Valley, whatever, Tiffin, right? Whatever it is. And from there, being able to send out an email. I know a lot of times there's some coaches that don't reply to emails, but there are camps that they have that you can get out and get in front of them, sending them an email saying, "Hey, coach, I'm excited for camp coming up here." I think it's the recency bias too, right? Where if we get an email and I see Keith Glasser right before I go to sleep the night before camp, you're like, I think I've heard that name before, right? So kind of playing the game a little bit as well, or just knowing it's going to pop up on my email on my phone, that this person, I might not read it, but I see the name and kind of look at it. That'll be somebody that I say hello to. And then I think getting involved, obviously in travel ball and some sort of figuring out what tournaments the organization is going to go through. It might be expensive at the end of the day, but some of that stuff does lead to being able to be seen by more colleges that way, whether it's the WWBA, PBR event. As you said, we talked about a little bit, the showcase piece and winning. Like, I think it's important to, at some point in time, go to a showcase or something of that nature so that you do have an idea of what your metrics are, right? Because if I Andy, I send you an email and I don't have any metrics, it's kind of like, okay, this Jimmy Roesinger guy over here from Indiana's terrible at baseball, right? Like, I don't know what I'm going to do with him, right? But I think that kind of gives you a starting point, because then you are on a PBR website. A lot of coaches are looking up on PBR and PG just to see the ranked guys, or can look people's name up that way. So that would be a start. And then, like I said, trying to come up with your list of schools that you believe that you're interested in, and trying to make it to camp and see what the coaching staff is like, see what the school is like. And then hopefully at the end of the day, you're good enough that they're like, hell yeah, we want you. Or I guess the other answer is, hell no, we don't want you, which helps you out as well too, rather than being stuck in limbo there.
Yeah, the feedback from camps, I think, can go a long way, especially if guys do it earlier rather than later. And we talk to the guys that we work with a lot of times that, hey, you're a high academic kid. We know Coach Brady at Columbia. Go to Columbia's camp. Let's figure out what these guys think of you. And if they love you, awesome. If they don't, let's get some feedback, because that informs the rest of your process. And to your point, I'm sure there's a lot of kids that show up to West Virginia camp that have high hopes of playing for you guys, but the no you give them might be what they need to refocus what they're doing and where they need to look. Because obviously you guys have an extremely high barrier to entry, being as good as you guys are, especially coming off the year that you guys had. You got to be really, really good. But sometimes that no is what leads you down the correct road, and you're not chasing things that just aren't going to be in the cards for you at the moment. So to your point, I think
Yeah.
those on-campus camps can be really valuable for kids.
Yeah, Andy, going off that point too, I think it's interesting that you say that with the camps, because I do think it will play a big part, especially with the 34 roster limit, right? And I think ever since signing date happened, junior year, you can't sign eighth graders anymore, right? So I think you've seen that our numbers at camp have gone down a little bit with the younger classes, but we just had three, younger kids that were, one was from PA and two of them were for West Virginia, and you see them and you're like, that kid, we need to invite him back to camp, the next time that we have it, so we can continue to create a relationship with him that way, seeing him at camp and seeing how he develops around there, rather than waiting until their junior year and trying to go to a camp that late. I mean, it's great, but a lot of times guys get committed right away. So the earlier, I think, the better. You won't be recruited or given an offer at that time, but no, coaches are looking and will be like, all right, we got to keep our eyes on this kid.
100%. 100%. Well, Jimmy, appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, this has been awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, it was good chatting with you, and we'll certainly be keeping tabs. We'll make sure you bust Jonathan's balls next time you talk to him.
Yeah, I will for sure. I need to catch up with him and see, tell him that you guys were giving him a load of crap. Tell him he's not pulling his weight. So
he's chasing those 4 girls around. They keep him busy.
yeah, no doubt.
God, I couldn't imagine.
No doubt.
Well, thanks again, man. Obviously, best of luck this spring. We'll be keeping tabs. Hopefully see you guys back in the tournament again, make a little bit more noise. But really appreciate your time. And yeah, thanks again.
No, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks everybody for listening. Yeah. Tune in next week. Thank you for listening this week. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and smash that like button for us. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EMD Baseball. If you want to find out what me and Keith do to help families and players navigate the recruiting process, go ahead and check us out on emdbaseball.com. Take a few minutes to check out our new online academy. I promise you'll get some good information out of that. Thanks again for listening. Check in with you next week.